Hi everybody, Sandra here from Created in Spain. Today I wanted to show you a design that I've put on this mug, and at the end of the video there's going to be another little hint tip for you, so keep watching. So I've got a very plain black mug here and I wanted to do a fancy design on it. And what I decided to do this time is use a stencil design. Now instead of cutting it from stencil material, what I did was I cut it from vinyl. So the design I have here is this one. Now I've only put it halfway around the mug, but in the file I'm giving you a version which has got one that will go all the way around. This one, as you might be able to tell hopefully on camera, is painted with colour changing paints, and I'll show you which ones I use in a minute. So in order to do this, there are a couple of steps which I suggest that you follow. Now the first one obviously is to cut your stencil and use your transfer paper, whatever type you're fond of using, to transfer the stencil itself to your mug. Now bear in mind you are cutting out the negative, so you are literally getting these black lines as a stencil, and it's quite fragile. So you do want to make sure that whatever you are using to cut it from isn't going to be particularly fragile. The vinyl I've got here is Arteza. It's pretty good. I don't find a problem with it. But you want to pick it up with a transfer paper, be that just normal book covering, plastic, whatever it is that you use, and put it onto your mug. When you've done that, use a plastic tape, and it's important it should be plastic tape, to cover up any parts of the mug that you want to protect. And the reason for doing this is because when you've done that, what you're first of all going to do is apply something like this. Now this happens to be Cadence Magic Glass, a glass etching cream. Now glass etching can be done on mugs as well. What will happen if you do it on a mug is it will take the glaze off. It doesn't affect the mug underneath, but it takes the shine off. All that glaze, all this lovely glossy surface here, is made opaque because it removes it. The acid eats through it and that glaze is then gone. Now you might be thinking, well, why do that when you're going to paint it? And the simple reason is keying. If you were to paint your window frames, if you've got wooden window frames, you would sand down the frames before you painted them. It helps the paint to stick, and this is the reason for doing that on a mug. Acrylic paint will stick to most things, but it will stick an awful lot better if the surface is keyed. So using an etching paste is the method of keying the mug. So you have your mask, your stencil basically in place, cover up all the bits that you don't want to be ruined basically, and then you can apply your etching paste. Now all I did was get a piece of household foam and a bulldog clip, and you simply do this. This is a much easier way of applying not only paste but your paints than it is by doing it by brush. You get a much more even result. When you've done that, you need to wash it off. You don't take the stencil away, but you take your mug to the sink and you wash it and use a soft cloth to remove any traces of the etching cream. Now when you're doing this, wear gloves because you're talking about acid paste here. You don't want it on your skin, okay? So do wear gloves when you're doing it. So when you've done that, you dry it. Now you can either leave it to air dry or you can use gentle wafting heat to dry it. Now I say gentle because you don't want to damage the vinyl. You don't want to cause the vinyl to shrink up, and you do not want the vinyl to come away from the mug. If you've got a fan on in the room, you can put it in front of a fan or something. Make sure it's well and truly dry before you do the painting, so then you can use the same type of sponge if you wish to dab on your paint. The paints I've used are these Vallejo, the shifters. Now I've got, I think it's like 21 colours, or maybe it's 18 colours I think in these. You can't tell what colour they are from the bottle necessarily. Like this white one here doesn't come out white, but it tells you on the bottle what colour it comes out in. And these are not the exact colours I used on there, I don't think, but they're similar. I just used some random bottles. Now, these are designed for airbrush use, so if you have an airbrush, you can by all means load up your airbrush and use them in that, and then it'll be really quick. But it's so quick, it's really probably not worthwhile getting your airbrush dirty. All I did was make sure they are well mixed. Now, these paints do have to be well mixed because of the duality of the colours. So you give them a really good shake for a couple of minutes to make sure that is the case. And then all I did was I put them down on my mat and I picked them up like that and just tap, 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 tap. You let this paint dry. Now, this is a proviso. If you're using this paint, it's very thin, it's very watery, it's like milk. So you can let that dry till it's touch dry before removing your stencil or your mask. If you're using a much thicker paint, then it's slightly more difficult because you can't let that dry properly. Acrylic paint will form a skin, and if it forms too thick a skin, it's going to stick to your stencil and then it's not going to come off well at all. So a thicker paint really isn't that great an idea. If your paint is too thick, you can thin them down a little bit. But if your paint is really thick to start with, it's only going to get a thin coat on here through a stencil. But remove the stencil before it dries. Now, to do that, I would suggest you have 2 people. One of you holding the mug and one of you removing the stencil. And the reason I say that is because trying to do it single-handed if your vinyl decides it wants to stay on the mug isn't as easy as all that. And it's much easier with 2 people, one to hold and one to pull. So yeah, get together in groups if you like to do mass mug production. But I think you'll agree it's a pretty design. It's one that I designed myself. And this one goes everything from pink to a copper to a greeny, bluey colour in certain types of light. So I happen to really love colour changing paints. You don't have to use colour changing paints. You could use normal paints. You could use metallic paints if you wanted to. Whatever happens to float your boat. But it's a pretty mug design and I thought I'd share it. So the file will be linked down below. Okay, so for my other little tip, I have this. You might be thinking, what on earth is it? All I've done here is I have got a laminating pouch and I have cut up pieces of either cellophane, coloured cellophane, which you can see here, complete transparent, or waxed paper into tiny little pieces. And I've put it in the pouch and then laminated it. So you now have a transparent plastic with colours in it. Now, this is only a sample piece and I don't have a jar of the right size, but the reason you might want to do this is for your summer outdoor lighting. You know, you can get the battery operated little LED lights that you can put in bottles and jars. Well, to make the jar prettier, what you can do is cut it to size and then you can take it and you can pop it into the jar. Now this one obviously does not fit my jar, but you can see the idea. You would end up with a pretty jar, lots of different colours, your lights go inside, and you have a nice little light. When you get fed up with the design, if you can reach it, which you can just about reach that, you can just take it back out again and use it for something else. You can also use this if you're making things like windows in your cars. You can also make them into luggage tags that are very obvious when you're going through an airport or something. You want to be able to see your luggage, check that it's yours. That's going to show up. No one else is going to have one the same, or it's highly unlikely. So there we go. That is my tip for today. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I will see you again soon. Take care now.